On the morning of 2006, in a level 5 maximum security prison in Louisiana, USA, a prison guard checked and saw an inmate sewing broken mailbags in a secure room as part of his work in the prison. But when the guard returned a few hours later to bring him back to his cell, he couldn't find the inmate anymore. He disappeared from the secure room. The guards checked the security cameras to see how he escaped, but they couldn't find anything. The inmate's name is Richard McNair, and he had just escaped one of the most heavily guarded prison facilities in America via mail. He's been called by many as one of the most intelligent escape artists in history, and you will see why in this amazing true story. Richard McNair was not just an ordinary criminal, because he was a sergeant in the U.S. Air Force and the son of a policeman. That's why his family cannot fully comprehend how a law enforcement officer who has sworn to serve the people could end up being a criminal. On November 17, 1987, Richard broke into a food warehouse in North Dakota to rob. But just as he was going in, a truck driver and a warehouse employee saw him. Instead of running, Richard immediately shot both men, killing truck driver Jerome Face. The warehouse employee was hit, but was able to run away and survive. Richard was immediately caught by the police, so he surrendered the gun that he used in the crime. He was handcuffed and placed in a room while the officers waited for his prison documents. Richard was so relaxed and was even smiling while in handcuffs. What the officers didn't know is that Richard already had something planned in his mind. Richard was holding a lip balm behind his back, then he secretly rubbed it on his hands, and before the officers came back, he was able to slip his hands from the handcuffs using the lip balm as a lubricant. He suddenly rushed out of the precinct and was immediately chased by the police officers. They chased him on the streets, around the school, until he entered a building. He was immediately surrounded by many policemen, while others chased him to the top of the building. When he was surrounded and cornered, Richard jumped from the window of the 3rd floor to a tree. Just then, the branch he was clinging on broke, and he fell to the ground on his back, which made it easy for the policemen to catch him. But this was just a prelude for his next daring escapes. After he recovered at the hospital, he was taken to Little Ward County Jail in Dakota to be detained. And he wasted no time. He tried to escape again by cutting the steel bars in the window of his prison cell. But an on-duty guard caught him on the act, so his attempt was unsuccessful. After which, he was immediately transferred to the larger and more secure North Dakota State Penitentiary. Here he was sentenced to 30 years in prison for the burglary case, and 2 life sentences for murder and attempted murder cases. It seems that Richard's brain does not stop in finding ways to escape. So far, he has done a successful escape, a sloppy unsuccessful attempt, and another masterful escape is on the way. After a few years in North Dakota State Penitentiary, Richard and 2 other inmates crawled into the prison's ventilation shaft. It turned out to be connected to a large pipe that goes all the way out the penitentiary building, so when they got out of the other end, they immediately gained the freedom they were looking for. Well, not quite for the other inmates though, because they were caught immediately after a few hours. But Richard managed to evade the police. He immediately changed his hair color and disguised himself into a few different identities. He moved from place to place in remote areas in America until he was spotted and caught again after 10 months. But this time, he was transferred to the Minnesota Correctional Facility, Oak Park Heights, which is a level 5 maximum security prison. Here, he will be spending his time behind bars with the most dangerous criminals in the whole country. Not a single prisoner has ever escaped from this jail since it was built. It is clear that the security in this prison is on a different level. And Richard was aware of this. He thought that there is no hope for any attempt at escaping in this prison, so he led a strike with other inmates. They raised the issue regarding their living conditions and maltreatment of prisoners in this facility. And his plan worked, but not quite, because he was transferred to another high-security USP Florence High Penitentiary in Denver. Again, no one has escaped this prison, so Richard found a way to be transferred once more to another high-security prison in Jackson, Louisiana. And this is where the most daring escape of his life will happen. He was given a job in the facility to repair damaged mailbags, where letters coming in and out of the prison are placed. Every day, he would stitch many of these bags, and while doing his job, there was nothing else in his mind but to think of a way to escape. The morning of April 5, 2006. A few days before his 50th birthday, a prison guard peeked in and saw that Richard was quietly sewing up the broken mailbags. Soon, a forklift arrived and took a pallet full of mailbags to be taken out to the storage facility outside of the prison compound. The prison guards had no idea that in one of these bags, a prisoner was hiding, and that is none other than Richard McNair. The workers in the storage facility wrapped the mailbags with plastic and vacuumed it to make them tight and save space. So it's even more amazing how Richard was able to breathe inside these bags after being squashed in the middle of it. In a stroke of genius, Richard was able to customize an escape pod that he placed in one of these bags. It is complete with a tube where he can breathe normally while inside. Richard stayed in the bag for a few hours, and when he was sure that the workers were gone to take a lunch break, Richard immediately came out of his hiding place and ran away to the train tracks just behind the prison compound. It was lunchtime, all the prisoners are supposed to be out, so the prison guards would not know that someone had escaped until 4 in the afternoon, during the head count. And when the guard checked Richard again to put him back in his cell, he was no longer there. The entire penitentiary was immediately alerted. Even police patrols in the surrounding areas were also informed that a prisoner has escaped. And what will happen next is another testament to how clever this man is. A police officer wondered why someone was jogging on the train tracks at this time of the day, not even wearing exercise clothing. So he immediately chased and stopped him, because he knew that someone had escaped from the prison, according to the information he received. The police officer asked the man if he could show him an ID card. And he calmly replied that he didn't bring one because he was out jogging. "Where do you live here?" said the police officer, "and what is your name?" "I'm just in a hotel with my brother, and we're just visiting here. And my name is Jimmy Jones. A while ago, he was just Richard McNair, now, he's Jimmy Jones. There is a prisoner who just escaped, that you may have seen." "I haven't seen anyone," Richard, alias Jimmy Jones said. "Please wait here, as I radio my station. I need an additional description of the escaped prisoner," said the policeman, while he radioed the station. Instead of running, while the officer was talking on the radio, Richard, alias Jimmy, calmly waited in front of the police officer. The officer explained to the other officer in the police station that in front of him now is a man who is almost 50 years old, has a beard, and has tattoos and glasses. "You know what?" the police said. "You look like the escaped prisoner according to the description of the person I talked to at the station." "That's bad luck," said Jimmy. "That's a shame." But even so, McNair was still able to convince the officer that he was really just visiting, and that he was living with his brother in a hotel that he said he had forgotten the name of. "Can I have your name again?" "It's Jimmy Jones," Richard McNair said again. "Okay. I'm sorry for bothering you with your running, because that's part of my job. Because if you were the prisoner who escaped, you would have run away, right?" "Yes indeed," McNair said. Then they laughed together. "Make sure you don't run into the train," said the police officer. "Okay, thanks." Then Richard McNair, alias Jimmy Jones, continued his run towards freedom. When Christmas came, McNair even managed to send a Christmas card to the warden of the penitentiary he escaped. This was his way to taunt them, which made the warden and staff of the prison feel very embarrassed. Immediately, he was placed on the 15 Most Wanted list in America, and his story was aired on the TV series America's Most Wanted for people to see. After a year of hiding, he was stopped by a policeman on a Canadian road because he was spotted driving a stolen car. While the police was explaining the violation, he immediately ran to a nearby forest. With the speed at which he ran, the police could not catch him. After only 2 days, the officer realized that it was Richard McNair, who was recently featured on TV in America's Most Wanted. A countrywide manhunt was in full swing. Using a stolen motorbike, McNair crossed the border and went hiding in various suburbs of British Columbia, a vast area in Canada. He left the stolen motorbike in a forest there. He then stole a car and returned to the United States. To confuse the police, he did not stay in one place, and every few weeks, he would move to different places until he returned back to Canada. He planned to live there permanently and bought a house in Williston Lake, Vancouver. If you were wondering where he gets the money to buy a house, McNair is also an expert carnapper. And no matter how high-tech the car's security is, he finds a way to steal it. He even steals cars inside showrooms. As long as there is no GPS tracking device, he would not hesitate to take it. He loves to take white cars, because according to him, it blends quickly on the roads, and is not easily noticed by police officers on the street. He uses it for a while, then he creates a fake document, and then sells it. And up to this time, he has stolen a lot of cars already, so he has a lot of money, and can afford to buy a property. The only problem is, because he has been featured 12 times on America's Most Wanted TV series, anyone who has a TV, or reads a newspaper, will definitely recognize him. So using his extraordinary computer skills, he was able to create a fake driver's license, using different names and appearances. He spends a lot of money buying props, clothes, wigs, and beards, to avoid being caught. He also has a dedicated computer, just to monitor the latest news about him on TV and newspapers. But his creativity was also the cause of his downfall. He bought an expensive van, customized it, and heavily tinted the window, so that the interior is not visible. But one day, a Canadian police officer noticed it in a parking lot. The officer was alarmed because the van looked expensive, but the tint looked cheap, and it's darker than what was allowed in Canada. The police took a note of the plate number and called the station, but McNair immediately drove off with the van. The next day, a rookie police who had only been on the job for 6 weeks, saw and identified McNair's van on the road. A car chase soon happened, and when the police officer pinned the van, and there was no more room to drive off, McNair immediately got out of the van to run into the nearby forest. McNair was running fast. But this time, the policeman chasing him is younger and faster. So after a few minutes, he was caught. McNair was just smiling and joking, while being handcuffed. Perhaps, he was so confident, that he will escape again. But McNair was wrong in what he thought. When he returned to the United States, he was immediately admitted to the USP Florence Supermax prison in Colorado, wherein each inmate was confined to a cell for 23 hours. For the 1 hour they are allowed out of their prison cells, there are 2 guards always on the watch. In short, the authorities have had enough of Richard McNair's escapes. There has not been a single escape from this prison since it was opened. International terrorists, spies, and leaders of the most dangerous gangs and international cartels are brought here, including El Chapo Guzman. Up until today, at age 64, Richard McNair remained incarcerated along with other notorious criminals in this super maximum security prison. This could be the place where he will grow old and die. Unless he can come up with another genius way to escape that no one has ever done before.